Hello and welcome to this video, and this video is going to be titled Making Music with a Modular Synth. And what I'd like to talk about today is really just my experience of how I make music using the modular. So by no means is this meant to be a how-to, or this is how you should make music or anything like that. This is just how I approach making music with modular. And I'd be interested, as ever, if you want to share your experiences and put something in the comments. Maybe you make music in a similar way to me. Maybe you have a completely different way of approaching music making. It's just always interesting to find out how other people do things as well. So without further ado, let's get into it. So I think for many of us, the attraction to the modular synth is the fact that you can make music with it without using a computer. So it's a very tactile, it's a very hands-on way of making music. You've got to, in many ways, you've got to play it like a real instrument. You've got to turn the knobs, push the sliders, plug cables in, etc. So it's a very hands-on instrument. Again, not like a computer. I think, as probably discussed in some previous videos, that is the attraction of it, is that you don't have to be using your mouse and clicking on things and going through menus and so on. Although there are some modules that have menus that you can use. But yeah, so it is a very physical way of making music. And excuse me, I'm just sort of recovering from COVID a little bit, so my voice is a little bit croaky here and there, so you have to excuse me. So probably the biggest, the biggest factor I find when it comes to working with modular is not having any kind of plan. Okay. So often when I approach the modular, actually no, probably the opposite is true. Quite often I have some intention that I've thought of something, an idea has come to me, and I think, oh, that would be quite interesting. I could try that out. Maybe I've made a note somewhere in a book or on my phone or whatnot, so I can remember it and come to it later. But I have some intention of something that I want to try out. And so I approach the modular with that intention. And what usually happens is either very quickly that intention goes out the window because something more interesting presents itself as soon as I start messing around, or I sort of try and force that intention and keep sort of plugging away at it, and I'm usually not very happy with the results, and then I end up just pulling out all the cables and starting from scratch again. So there's this idea of planning or maybe not planning, and I often find that on the days when I try and do something, try and plan out what I'm doing and do something intentionally, those are the days when I have the least amount of breakthroughs, or I'm least happy with what I'm doing. Whereas the days when I just kind of mess around and mess around really, those are the days when the most interesting things come about. And a classic example of that was yesterday. So I had yesterday, I don't know when this video is going to come out, but yesterday was a Monday. On a Monday afternoon, I get a few hours to tinker whilst my daughter's at nursery. So those couple of hours are quite precious, which I guess means there's a little bit of pressure to do something productive in that time. But that's the time that I use for making videos and tinkering with the modular and all the rest of it. And usually what happens is that I'll spend the majority of that time plugging away at something, intending to try and do something, which is exactly what happened yesterday. I wanted to do something specific, and I must have spent about 2 hours trying to do that particular thing, and it just didn't work. And then the time was up, and I'd got nothing to show for it. But I went away, picked my daughter up from nursery, came home, and then she wanted to come up here and have a look, because she does sometimes. She enjoys getting involved and plugging things in and probably destroying whatever whatever I've created. But that's all part of the fun. So she wanted to come, and whilst she was up here, I just had I just started messing around with something. 10 minutes, and in that 10 minutes, I produced something that was way more interesting than the whole of the previous couple of hours. I couldn't do anything about it at that time because we had to go and do the shopping and get some tea and all the rest of it. So I just had to sort of bank that and leave it. And then once she'd gone to bed, I did manage to come back and have a little tinker with that idea. But it's interesting how quite often I can spend a couple of hours that are completely unproductive, or it seems unproductive because I haven't actually achieved anything, and then I can walk away and then walk back to it, and in a couple of minutes something comes out that's way more interesting. So sometimes I think, in order to bypass that step, it's better not to have any planned intention when going into a situation. So I do try not to do that, but of course sometimes it might be necessary. If I have in the past, I have done some commissions for creating some music for short films and so on, and there is a brief to work to there, so there has to be a little bit of a plan. But wherever possible, I do think nowadays that having no plan is the best plan. And so I think that ties into my next point, which is that working with modular, there is a real sense of exploration and discovery, and you can't really do that if you've got a plan. Okay, I think modular works best when you're exploring, when you're tinkering, when you're messing about, and things come out that will be interesting. Just on a little side note, that's why I'm wearing this hat today. So this hat is another ridiculous hat, but it is in fact a replica of the Indiana Jones hat, and obviously Indiana Jones, very famous explorer. But it's not just a replica of the Indiana Jones hat. The original Indiana Jones hat was made by a company whose name I can't remember, and then the same company that made the fourth Doctor Who, Tom Baker, they made his hat as well. Very similar design. So this it's not quite the same as the Doctor Who hat, but it's a stand-in for explorations in time and space, adventures in time and space. Two explorers, Indiana Jones and Doctor Who, that have worn hats similar to this. And that's why I'm wearing this hat today, as we're talking about the exploration of sound and music within the modular synth world. Anyway, that's just a little side note. So that exploration will often lead to unpredictable outcomes, or serendipitous happy accidents, and that's one of the beauties of modular, is that little things come out that you don't expect, and they will the modular will surprise you, and little ideas come out, little patterns, and I think that's because of the complex nature of how the modular system works. It is essentially, a whole bunch of tiny little components that are working together in a network. And that network, every part of that network is influencing the network together. I'm going to say that again. I'll probably edit that bit out. So every part of that network is influencing the network, and they're all working together. All those components within the modular are working together. And sometimes it does give the impression, or it gives the feeling, that when you're working with a modular synth, you are working with a collaborative partner, a non-human partner. Because as I say, things will come out which you're not expecting, and that will influence you in a certain way, and it may send you down a little path that you wouldn't ever have come up with by yourself. I think that's another part of the beauty of modular is sometimes I listen back to the music that I've created and I think, well, goodness me, I don't even remember making that. Let alone have any idea what the intention behind it was. So, and there is this sense of collaboration with the modular synth, and a lot of the time, you sort of. I also find it's sort of a meditation as well. So you really can get caught up in the flow of performing or improvising or creating music, or whatever you want to term it, and that then leads on to further creativity. When it is working, which isn't always, as I just said, I spent a couple of hours yesterday to no avail, but then 10 minutes produce much greater results. But when you are working, there is a sense that you're kind of in the zone. You've got this flow, and it becomes very much like a meditation, where you're sort of locked into the zone, completely focused on what you're doing, and you're working with the modular, you're collaborating with the modular, and kind of feeding off each other in a way. So that I think those few points there kind of, I would say, sums up my experience of what it's like working with a modular synth. So apart from that, then I probably would say what do I actually do when working with a modular synth? And a lot of what I'm doing, I guess, is improvising. So you start patching things together and you start creating sounds and patterns, and then you start turning knobs and sliders and seeing what happens. And there is very much an improvisory nature to what you're doing, testing things out. It's a little bit kind of trial and error, and usually that's what happens, and that's my actual method. So once I've kind of got an idea of something that's interesting, I'll usually try and get together a couple of voices, maybe like 3 voices or 2 voices, things that are going on separately, and I'll kind of try and find what will be, I guess, kind of like the peak of the composition. So if we think of a piece of music having some kind of flow to it, where it might start off in a certain way and then build towards a peak and then drop down again, I will usually try and find that peak first, which may be all of the voices playing together. It may be some quite intense sound or something, but I'll try and find that peak first and then work backwards from that. And then when it comes to the actual recording, I guess it's an improvisation. So I will have created that or found that peak, worked my way backwards, and then it's a case of performing it as an improvisation, and then recording that performance. I don't tend to sort of multi-track anything. The whole thing just is a stereo out into this mixing desk, which goes into my computer. So I'm just recording left and right, and that's it really. So the whole thing is a performance. I record the performance, and and then that's it. That's the composition, and that will be completely improvised. Usually, I will only record the first performance. So if it all goes wrong, I might do it again if it's really, really bad. But quite often, or something happens like the batteries run out, or I don't know, there's a technical problem that requires you to do it again. But usually, the first take will be the one that happens, and that's usually because, as I say, there's that level of improvising and that level of sort of unplannedness and that collaboration with the modular synth, and there will be little gems in there that I probably won't be able to recreate again. So even if there are some mistakes or things that aren't quite right, I'm not really that bothered about that. I'll just leave those in, because I often think that the sort of the magic, so it were, happens on that first take. And if you try and do lots and lots of takes to get the perfect performance, it often just ends up being a little bit stale, or you just can't recreate the magic of that first performance. So usually, the first performance will be the one. Having said that, I do sometimes, what I've recently started doing is writing down. I've got this notebook here which I can maybe just show you. So this big book here, this is my notebook, and I started writing down, you probably can't see that, but I started writing down every single patch, every single performance composition, exactly what I'm doing, what module is patched to which. And the reason for doing that is so that I can revisit old patches and old pieces of music, and that I found is also interesting, because sometimes if I come back to a patch, a few months later, and I recreate it, I follow the instructions exactly as I've written it down, and it won't always be exactly as it was originally, because even though I've written everything down best I can, it's it's not perfect. Maybe there's a knob that's just ever so slightly different position or something like that. And excuse me. And it's interesting coming back to patches, because sometimes you come back to a patch and there's things that you realise about it that you want to change, and so there's kind of like an iterative nature to some of the compositions as well. Whereas that initial composition, when revisited, can change quite radically and become something completely new. But I wouldn't be able to do that if I hadn't written everything down, to be able to revisit it at a later date. So that's something that I'm doing, and also just writing notes, or kind of like a journal, of what my thoughts are at the time, what my intentions were with the patch, that sort of thing. So I guess if I kind of try and sum all of that up, I've kind of rambled on a little bit, and I'm not really sure what I've talked about now. So I would say the key thing is not planning too much, and really having that sense of exploration, discovery, embracing the unpredictability, the happy accidents of the process. Improvising is key when it comes to the actual performance and recording, and then on a more practical sense, it's trying to find the peak of the music first and sort of work backwards from there. Embracing mistakes, and returning to old patches. So those are some of the key elements of my practice, you might say, with making music with a modular synth. So I hope you found that interesting. Of course, as ever, please like and subscribe if you've not done so, and it'd be really interesting to hear from some of you guys on how you approach making music with modular, and your own explorations and adventures in modular synth. Okay, thank you. See you next time.